My name is Lucas Carter, and I'm 25 years old. I'm originally from Phoenix, Arizona, but I've been spending the past few months driving cross-country for work. There's something freeing about the open road, but there are moments when it's downright unsettling. One of those moments happened not long ago, and it still makes me second-guess driving alone at night. I was heading east through a remote stretch of highway in New Mexico. It was about 3 a.m., and I hadn't seen another car for at least an hour. My eyelids were getting heavy, and my gas tank was nearing empty. I spotted a sign for a rest area about 2 miles ahead and decided to stop. The idea of stretching my legs and grabbing something from a vending machine sounded good. When I pulled in, the place was nearly deserted. There were only 2 cars parked far apart, both with foggy windows that suggested someone was sleeping inside. The dim parking lot lights flickered, casting eerie shadows across the cracked pavement. The restroom building sat at the far end, looking like it hadn't been renovated in decades. I parked my car close to the vending machines, which were mounted on a wall just outside the restrooms. As I got out, I noticed a man leaning against the restroom wall. He was tall and wiry, wearing a faded jacket that looked too thin for the cold night air. His face was shadowed under a baseball cap, but I could feel his eyes on me. I tried to ignore him as I fumbled for change, but the sound of my coins clinking into the vending machine seemed deafening in the silence. I glanced over my shoulder, and sure enough, he was staring directly at me. Not in a casual way, his gaze was fixed, unblinking. It sent a shiver down my spine. I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe he was just waiting for someone or taking a break from driving. Still, I couldn't shake the unease. My hands felt clammy as I grabbed my snack and walked briskly back to my car, avoiding eye contact. Before I could shut the door, I heard rapid footsteps. The man was suddenly beside my car, tapping on the driver's side window. My heart raced as I rolled it down just a crack. "Hey man," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "I need a ride to the next town. My car broke down. Can you help me out?" His excuse didn't sit right with me. I'd seen no broken down cars, and the parking lot was so empty I would have noticed. The way he leaned closer, almost pressing his face against the window, made me feel trapped. "Sorry, I'm not going that way," I said quickly, trying to sound firm. "Come on," he insisted, his tone sharpening. "It's just a few miles. You can't leave me stranded." I shook my head, rolled the window up, and started the engine. As I pulled away, he slapped the back of my car hard, the sound echoing through the still night. My chest was tight, and my hands trembled on the steering wheel. I didn't even bother checking my rearview mirror. I just wanted to put as much distance as possible between myself and that rest area. But as I got back on the highway, relief turned to dread. In the rearview mirror, headlights appeared, gaining on me fast. The car behind me began flashing its high beams over and over, as if signaling me to pull over. I gripped the wheel tighter, my mind racing. Was it the same man? Did he have a partner waiting in another car? I sped up, hoping to lose them, but the car matched my speed, the high beams glaring into my mirrors. I grabbed my phone and called 911, my voice shaking as I explained the situation to the operator. She told me to keep driving to a well-lit area with other people around. About 10 minutes later, I spotted a brightly lit truck stop up ahead. I veered into the parking lot and parked near a cluster of semi-trucks. The other car slowed but didn't pull in. Instead, it lingered at the entrance for a few seconds before turning around and disappearing into the night. I stayed on the line with the operator until a patrol car arrived. The officer took my statement and asked me to describe the man in the car. When I mentioned the rest area, his expression darkened. "That rest stop has a bad reputation," he said. "It's been linked to several robberies and even a few kidnappings. You're lucky you didn't stop for longer." Hearing that sent chills through me. I kept thinking about how persistent the man had been, how he seemed to be waiting for someone like me to show up. Since that night, I've made a rule for myself. No stopping at rest areas after dark. The open road might feel free and exciting, but out there in the dead of night, you're vulnerable. And sometimes, the wrong stop can put you in the crosshairs of someone with bad intentions. My name is Olivia Bennett, and I'm 24 years old. I live in a small town in Michigan, not far from Detroit. I work as a graphic designer, and like most people my age, I enjoy hanging out with friends when I get the chance. But after what happened a few weeks ago, I've been wary of going out late, especially alone. That night still haunts me, and I can't stop thinking about how close I came to something terrible. It was a Friday night, and I had just left my friend Emily's house. She had thrown a small party, and I stayed later than I planned, catching up with old friends. By the time I left, it was nearly 1 a.m. The streets were dark and quiet as I drove home, my headlights cutting through the misty night. About halfway home, I noticed a car behind me. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe they were headed in the same direction, I thought. But as I kept driving, they matched every turn I made. It was subtle at first, but soon it became impossible to ignore. I turned down a side street, hoping to confirm my suspicion. The car turned too. My heart began to race. I told myself it was just a coincidence, but when I turned again, onto a completely random road, the car followed. That's when panic started to set in. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel, my palms slick with sweat. Who were they? What did they want? I tried shaking them off by weaving through my neighborhood, taking random turns and doubling back on streets I'd already passed. But no matter what I did, the car stayed on my tail. Its headlights loomed in my rearview mirror, an ominous reminder that I wasn't alone. I reached for my phone, my hands trembling as I dialed 911. The operator's calm voice was a lifeline. I explained what was happening, and she told me to drive directly to the nearest police station. By then, I was shaking so badly I could barely think straight. The police station was about 10 minutes away, but every second felt like an eternity. I kept glancing in my mirrors, terrified the car would try to run me off the road or worse. Finally, I saw the bright lights of the police station ahead. Relief washed over me as I pulled into the lot. The car behind me hesitated at the entrance before speeding off into the night. I stayed on the phone with the operator until an officer came out to meet me. I thought the nightmare was over. I was wrong. The officer asked me to step out of my car and give a statement. As we talked, another officer approached with a flashlight and started inspecting my car. Moments later, he froze, his expression grim. "Ma'am, did you lock your car when you stopped anywhere tonight?" he asked, his tone serious. I racked my brain, replaying the night in my head. Then it hit me. I had stopped at a gas station on my way to Emily's house. It was a quick stop, just to grab a drink. I'd been in a rush and didn't think to lock the doors. My stomach sank as the officer opened my back door. There, crouched on the floor behind the driver's seat, was a man. He was disheveled, his face pale and gaunt. In his hand was a knife. The officers quickly subdued him and took him into custody. I couldn't move. My knees buckled, and I had to lean against the hood of my car to keep from collapsing. The realization hit me like a freight train. He had been in my car the entire time. The car that had been following me wasn't trying to harm me. They were trying to warn me. They must have seen him get in at the gas station and followed me, hoping to alert me or scare him off. That thought alone made my skin crawl. I had been driving for nearly 30 minutes, completely unaware of the danger just a few feet away. The police later told me the man had a history of violent offenses and was likely waiting for the right moment to attack. If I hadn't gone to the station, if I hadn't noticed the car following me, I might not be here to tell this story. Since that night, I've been extra cautious. I always lock my doors, even if I'm just stepping out for a second. And I never ignore my instincts, no matter how paranoid they might seem. The thought of what could have happened still keeps me up at night, Sometimes, I replay the moment I walked back to my car at the gas station, wondering if he was already watching me. It's a terrifying reminder of how quickly a normal night can turn into a nightmare. Ready to feel a chill run down your spine? Join us in the shadows and dive into the world of terrifying tales and creepy encounters. Subscribe now to Shivers in the Dark and hit the bell so you never miss a story that keeps you up at night. My name is Ethan Parker, and I'm 32 years old. I live in a quiet town in upstate New York, where life tends to move at its own slow pace. I've been working the night shift at a small manufacturing plant just outside of town for the past 5 years. It's not the most exciting job, but it's steady, and the nights are usually uneventful. But a few weeks ago, something happened that changed the way I look at the world. I still can't stop thinking about it, and some nights I barely sleep because of it. That night started out like any other. There were only 3 of us on shift. Me, my coworker Alex, and our supervisor, who stayed in the office most of the night. Alex was 28, an easygoing guy who always had a joke to make the long hours go by faster. We weren't best friends, but we worked well together. Around 2 a.m., Alex said he was stepping outside for a smoke. "Be back in 10, he said with a grin. I barely looked up from what I was working on and just nodded. That was the last time I saw him alive. 15 minutes passed, then 20. At first, I didn't think much of it. Smoke breaks sometimes took longer if Alex got distracted scrolling through his phone or chatting with someone. But when 30 minutes went by, I started to feel uneasy. I went to the break room to see if he'd come back, but his bag and phone were still there, sitting on the table. That struck me as odd. Why would he leave without taking his phone? I peeked out into the parking lot. Alex's car was still there, parked right where it always was. I called his phone, but it just rang and rang. My stomach started to knot. I told myself he might have left early and forgotten to grab his things, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. By 4 a.m., I couldn't shake the feeling anymore. I decided to check the security cameras with the supervisor. We pulled up the footage from the side door where Alex had gone out. There he was on the screen, stepping outside with a cigarette in hand. He lit it and leaned against the wall for a moment. Then he moved off camera toward the back of the building. That was it. He never came back into view. The supervisor called the police. They arrived just as the shift ended and started searching the area. I stayed behind, hoping they'd find Alex wandering nearby, maybe lost or hurt. Instead, they found tire tracks near the edge of the woods behind the plant. The tracks were deep, like a vehicle had sped off in a hurry. My heart sank as the officers marked the area and began combing the woods. I went home that morning, but I couldn't sleep. I couldn't stop thinking about where Alex could be, or what might have happened to him. 2 days later, the news broke. They found Alex's body in a shallow grave deep in the woods. He'd been strangled, and there were signs of a struggle. I felt like someone had punched me in the chest. The police pieced it together quickly. The killer was a disgruntled ex-employee who'd been fired months earlier for threatening his supervisor. He'd been lurking around the plant for weeks, watching and waiting. He admitted to targeting Alex simply because he was alone that night. I haven't stopped replaying the night in my head since. What if I had gone outside to check on Alex sooner? What if I'd noticed something strange on the cameras earlier? I was just a few rooms away while he was being taken, and I didn't do anything. The company installed better lighting and added more cameras after the incident, but it feels meaningless. Nothing can undo what happened, and no amount of security will ever erase the memory of that night. Every time I step outside now, I feel like someone's watching me. Even when I know I'm alone, I can't shake the feeling that danger is lurking just out of sight. It's like the world I thought I knew has shifted into something darker, something I'll never fully trust again. That night taught me a harsh lesson. Safety is an illusion. Danger doesn't always announce itself. It hides in the quiet, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And when it does, it leaves scars that never truly heal.